Woke is bullshit.
Yes, woke is BS. That's from, of course, the USA conference, down Turning Point USA, AmFest conference in Phoenix, Arizona, from Sunday. Tremendous response. And that was a tremendous speech. So much, and I'm going to go through a little bit of it with you in a second when we come back with more. So welcome to Krayden's Right and Stand on Guard. We're here to do that. We'll be back momentarily.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist.
I know we're going to be examining Justin Trudeau's relationship with his father, whomever that might be, in a minute. But it's interesting to note that Donald Trump is including, shall we say, photographs in a coffee table book that question Justin Trudeau's parentage, that suggest that Justin Trudeau is actually the son of Fidel Castro and not Pierre Trudeau. Now, I've been criticized for even raising this question on this show. People have said, how, don't stoop so low as to raise conspiracy theories. I'm not raising them. What's important to know, though, is that Donald Trump is raising them because he's trolling Justin Trudeau. He has no respect for this man, and he shouldn't. Trudeau has lost the respect of Canadians. He never had the respect of Donald Trump. But if you watch this speech, and it's a long speech from this conference, Donald Trump touches on so many things. And what I found fascinating is that he's actually talking about he wants the Panama Canal back if he doesn't feel like the fees are going to be equitable. That's an incredible statement to make. And he's going to rename Mount McKinley, which Obama changed the name in 2015 to an indigenous Alaskan term. I'm not even going to say it. But he's going to go back to Mount McKinley because that's normal. And he likes President McKinley's memory because this was a president who built the wealth of the United States on tariffs, not taxes. And he really believes in the gold standard. Now, do you think the United States could go back to the gold standard as well? Now, there's just so much possible right now that it's really, these are very exciting times. But we're going to be examining Justin Trudeau's relationship with Pierre Trudeau. How are they similar? Well, let's have a look at this extended scene. Everybody knows the last couple of seconds here. This is Justin Trudeau being accosted. No, sorry, this is Pierre Trudeau, October 1970, being confronted by two reporters on the steps of Parliament Hill. And the security was like that in those days. I mean, you could walk anywhere. And this is in the middle of the October crisis, actually. But let's listen to Trudeau's response to invoking the War Measures Act, which was the precursor to the Emergencies Act. And just some of the things he says, I want to compare and contrast those.
To the choice.
For those of you who don't know or don't remember, this is, of course, in the middle of the FLQ, the Front de Libération du Québec, which was a terrorist group. They'd kidnapped a British ambassador and a provincial cabinet minister, and Cross and Laporte. And they wound up both being found dead. But in the midst of this insurrection of some kind, Trudeau invoked the War Measures Act. And it was what I find interesting about this confrontation, two things. The reporter is not saying, great, thank you, Mr. Trudeau, for slamming down on Canadian freedoms. because of an isolated incident in Quebec. Because the rest of Canada had nothing to do with this. This was completely focused in Quebec, in Montreal area, Quebec City maybe. From Montreal to Quebec City, that corridor was the only place in Canada affected by this. The FLQ had no intention of going outside of the province and start kidnapping cabinet ministers from Alberta. But the reporter is antagonistic towards Trudeau and the invocation of the War Measures Act. Compare that to how the CBC, this is an old CBC clip, responded to Trudeau and the Emergencies Act. Congratulatory. Yeah. When Trudeau locked down the country with COVID mandates, what did CBC do? What did the mainstream media do? They congratulated him. They were not combative. They were not confrontational. They were not in any way really critical of this. Just, in fact, they said, convince us. Justin, please convince us you're doing the right thing. And we'll print that. We'll broadcast that. Just convince us. Please, we're your willing servants. Different attitude here. And not only that, I'll give this to Pierre Trudeau. And I was never a fan of Pierre Trudeau. I have a lot of stories about Pierre Trudeau, which I'm not going to bore you with now on Christmas Eve. But Pierre Trudeau at least engages with this reporter in a conversation. He doesn't begin to immediately read his talking points. He actually asks questions of the reporter. What would you do? How do you feel about this? How would you do it differently? What do you think I'm doing wrong? Instead of just gushing the talking points like Justin Trudeau would do. And he's got about 5 of them. In fact, if this happened with Justin Trudeau would say, do you know 8 out of 10 Canadians are getting more back in their pockets from the Canadian carbon rebate? Did you know climate change is an existential threat? Did you know Canada has a free lunch program? That's how Justin Trudeau would respond. Not even listening to what this reporter said. Just watch me. And of course, the historic words. But what is he saying here? Weak-kneed people, bleeding hearts. You think, wow, there's a tough prime minister. And of course, Pierre Trudeau had various personas that he played, especially during election campaigns. One of them was the gunslinger, where he would literally stand with his hands on his hips like he was ready for a gunfight. That was the gunslinger posture. And that's what he's doing here. He's saying, I'm going to get those, I don't care about the bleeding hearts. But of course, and this is what we're getting to in this broadcast. Does that make him a good prime minister because he's prepared to crush dissent and any kind of dissent in his way? Yeah, the objective here is actually a heck of a lot more legitimate than it was during the Emergencies Act. He is trying to enforce law and order against a terrorist group. Good. He didn't have to use the War Measures Act to do that. Justin Trudeau was not dealing with terrorists. Justin Trudeau was not dealing with a real threat. He was dealing with political prisoners. And Pierre Trudeau, at one time in this clip, says, don't call the FLQ political prisoners. They're not. And they weren't. Freedom Convoy people were political prisoners. Justin Trudeau did not need to invoke the Emergencies Act because they were not terrorists. They were not criminals. They were not doing anything against the law. But even here, where there is some justification for invoking the War Measures Act because they're dealing with a terrorist group that is potentially about to hurt and kill people, the reporters are still saying, what about freedom of speech? What about freedom of assembly? How is this going to impact the rest of Canada? You can't do this just because 2 people are being threatened. You can't threaten the whole country. That's the difference in debate. Because Trudeau was a heck of a lot more justified in invoking the War Measures Act than Justin Trudeau was ever justified in invoking the Emergencies Act. Okay, weak-kneed, bleeding hearts. He said it twice. Now, a lot of conservatives would say, good for Trudeau. He's coming down hard on those weak-kneed, bleeding hearts. But guess what? Mao Zedong in China came down on those weak-kneed, bleeding hearts as well, to the tune of 60 million people dead, because they were standing in his way. They were standing in the way of communism. So they were perfectly expendable. And Mao exterminated tens of millions of Chinese people during the spread of communism in China. Now, that's what Trudeau is talking about here. He's not the good conservative, small c conservative politician saying, I want to defend the rights of the innocent in our society and get those criminals. He wants he wants control. And Justin Trudeau has inherited the legacy of Pierre Trudeau, being a pawn and being captive to China. Let's listen to this fascinating interview with Terry Glavin and our favorite psychiatrist, Mr. Peterson. This is really good here.
Oh, here's the thing about Trudeau.
Yeah.
There's really not much there. I hate to be uncharitable.
I think it's time to be uncharitable.
Okay. Well, there really isn't much there. He's. I think you've been very interested in the phenomenon of narcissism. There you go.
Well, let me...
The world is a vanity mirror, and you have to remember when he came along, it sort of parallels the rise of Trump in the United States, right? When he was first elected, just a few months from the election of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump, said all these scary things about Muslims, and then Justin Trudeau, tweets, well, everybody's welcome to Canada. It doesn't matter. You can be a Muslim. We love you. The next thing you know, he's on the front page of the Rolling Stone magazine. He's the toast of, Vogue photo shoots. He's the leader of the free world. And
he was the poster boy for he is the poster boy for the progressive movement internationally, I would say.
It's so difficult to explain this to people from away. If you can imagine a kind of, a TikTok account run by a 19-year-old college girl in charge of a G7 country. That's basically
14-year-old.
Okay. But anyway, so he emerges. How does he present himself to the Liberal Party as a worthwhile leader of the party? And for this, he turned to McKinsey and Associates.
Consulting firm. Major
massive
consulting
global
firm.
Consulting firm. The apologist for dictators everywhere. I don't know how many billions of dollars they've had to pay. There you go.
Well,
the world is,
All right.
He present himself to the Liberal Party.
Sorry, now this is the fascinating part about this interview. This Glavin doesn't actually say the word globalist, but that's what he's describing. He's saying Justin Trudeau and Pierre Trudeau were both globalists. Pierre Trudeau, of course, was a member of the Club of Rome, one of those international groups that wants world government, but they both sucked up to China. This is why Justin Trudeau never wants to investigate China. He's always pointing his finger at India, Russia, but never China. Because yes, Justin Trudeau has benefited from election interference from China. Pierre Trudeau did everything he possibly could to prop up China. And when Mao died, I think it was 1976, Pierre Trudeau got up in the House of Commons and called him a hero, called him a great man. Let's listen to a little more of Terry Glavin.
As a worthwhile leader of the party. And for this, he turned to McKinsey and Associates.
Consulting firm. Major
massive
consulting
global
firm.
Consulting firm. The apologist for dictators everywhere. I don't know how many billions of dollars they've had to pay out in lawsuits for boosting OxyContin sales in the United States. A fellow by the name of Dominic Barton, who happened to be a Canadian, who spent half his life in China as the head of McKinsey. Trudeau brought him in. And essentially, to add gravitas to his candidacy for the Liberal Party,
Under whose advisement did he bring in McKinsey? Do you know? Like, was that his idea? Or I don't imagine.
Well, it's
part
a
of the
small
cabal
It
around
is a
it.
small town. It is a small town.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Ottawa.
It was he was essentially a function of the Canada-China Business Council. This is a really important thing for people to understand. His entire campaign was built around the proposition, and this is how he sort of lent gravitas to himself, that the key to the future is China. Canada's future is China. The middle-class prosperity is all about China, China, China. And this immediately, he immediately accrued to himself a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of help. The Desmarais Corporation, the Power Corporation in Montreal, those whole circles. And of course, his father, people don't like to talk about this when they talk about Pierre Trudeau, but he was probably the most important propaganda asset for the Chinese Communist Party during the Maoist period in the English-speaking world.
That's nothing. It's just the Chinese communists.
Yeah.
What'd they kill? 100 million people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and Trudeau would trade in this and say, well, they know me in China, my family name. And a lot of that was sort of glossed over. People didn't notice what was going on.
Well, people were optimistic
because
about
he was so glamorous, right?
we were also optimistic, I think.
So this is why Justin Trudeau deliberately lied about there being an RCMP investigation into Indian heads of state or Indian diplomats. He made the whole thing up and didn't want to talk about Chinese interference. That Hogue inquiry was ultimately an utter waste of time because Trudeau hijacked it. Trudeau hijacked that inquiry to make it about India, which, of course, when the PCO said there's been no charges against India, there's no investigation going on, Trudeau said, oh, well, that's because some whistleblower made that comment. Total blatant, bald-faced lie. And anybody in the National Press Corps should have called him out on that, but they let him get away with it, even though he had a news conference and the RCMP had a news conference to say the exact opposite. And Trudeau even used that incident. Trudeau used his lie about India to talk about going after whistleblowers, criminalizing whistleblowers. That's what this man is all about. Just a bit more of this, and I want to hear another segment.
I think in the West for a reasonable amount of time that if China integrated itself into the Western economy, that they would liberalize across time.
Some of us were.
It was a case you could put forward if you were aware with all due caution of the potential risks, right? But
that's what I'm told. Maybe it's the company.
I'm trying to give the devil his due here.
Well, all I can tell you is that, two things happened in 2001. What happened, the atrocities in New York and Washington, the Al-Qaeda atrocities.
All right. Here, I want just a couple of minutes here, a couple of seconds here.
Dominic Barton, who ended up being our ambassador to China, the guy who came from China's McKinsey and Associates and who crafted Trudeau's campaign material at the very, very, very beginning of his rise to politics, says, we should actually have about 500,000 people coming into Canada every year. We should aim for 100 million. We should at least double our population, in the next generation or two.
Well, we've had more than 500,000 coming in. Right?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, by a substantial number.
We don't know how many people live in this country, Jordan.
Yeah.
We know from a recent...
This is a fascinating statement. We don't know how many people live in Canada, just like we don't know how many illegal immigrants are in Canada, much like in the United States. And that's going to get worse unless something really serious happens at the border.
Census, it's about 41 million. But on top of that, we have, for instance, over the next 12 months, 5 million people who live in Canada on various kinds of temporary permits and so
So
on.
it's 1/8 of the population.
Within the next 12 months, those permits expire.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's another between 50 and 500,000, according to the official guess of the Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Department, who are what they call out of contract workers, which are undocumented workers. Now, for Americans to hear these numbers, America's 10 times as many people, it's 10 times as populous. So, just do the math, right?
Yeah.
If there's 5 million, if there are 50 million American or people living in the United States whose temporary permits expire within the next 12 months and who have all given every impression that they do not intend to leave.
Yes. Why would they leave?
So Pierre Poilievre's coming along, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about Pierre Poilievre, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about language. And I go, is this liberal or, what the hell? Pierre Poilievre, when he talks about housing, when he talks about employment, when he talks about access to healthcare, when he talks about wages, he's Bernie Sanders. The Americans have to understand this. Try to imagine Bernie Sanders. I mean, and also the trade union vote has gone to
The
conservatives, gone to Poilievre. This has never happened before.
Yeah.
The working class vote has gone to Pierre Poilievre. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a partisan conservative. I don't know if I've ever written a conservative sentence in my life, by the way, although most of my friends seem to be conservatives. I don't know how that happens.
Well, the whole world's upside down, so that's not surprising.
So what the hell?
Whatever the classic political distinctions were 15 years ago, whatever they are now bears no relationship to what they were 15 years ago.
So my great fear, and I'll close with this, and you can challenge me. Tell me I'm wrong, or if you like, whatever. You can argue. I think we've got about a year or two before everything starts to come unglued. And I'm very worried about this. I've always been an optimist. I've been an inveterate optimist. But I actually haven't seen in Poilievre a degree of sophistication in comprehending the nature and the scope of what he's going to be facing when he
I don't know if he can. I don't know if he can comprehend it. I mean, I regard myself as a moderately sophisticated political observer, and you've made me more pessimistic today.
Sorry.
Well, I was already very concerned about the state of Canada because I think that, I'll give you an example. And
now, he's so concerned about the state of Canada, of course, he's left. But Jordan Peterson, always a good interview. So what's the family secret I'm talking about, which probably attracted you here? The family secret is this. Whether or not Justin Trudeau is actually the son of Fidel Castro or the son of Pierre Trudeau, in the political terms, it's irrelevant because both of those men promoted communism. Both of those men promoted totalitarian politics and were prepared to do whatever they needed to do to move ahead. Now, Justin Trudeau has inherited that damnable totalitarian spirit. He is also prepared to do whatever he has to do to maintain power in the spirit of Fidel Castro or Pierre Trudeau. So this is why I say, if you think Trudeau is going to be waking up Christmas morning tomorrow and saying, I think it's time for me to go. I think come January, I'm going to come clean with the Canadian people and say, I've just been too proud. And I need to step aside. It's been almost 10 years. My time is up. If you think that, think again. Justin Trudeau is always prepared to do what he needs to do to hang on to power, whether it's for the party or the country. Anyway, I'll leave it at that for today. I will be back again tomorrow with a special Christmas episode. We're just going to be talking, probably very little politics tomorrow. I'm going to be talking about Christmas. And I'm going to share a song with you. One song, maybe more. And I want you all to have a very Merry Christmas Eve. I've got to work today, believe it or not, the rest of the day. But we're with you. And please be safe, be with your family, be with your loved ones. Enjoy this time together. Because I tell you, in the last year, I've come to realize, well, if I didn't know it already, you don't know how much time you have with those loved ones and those family members. So enjoy it while you can, because it's such an important time. Thank you for watching today. And I'll leave you with this. And remember, Christmas is tomorrow, but you can still.
Ho, 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 ho!
Yeah, don't forget that cup. That is my favorite. See you tomorrow, folks. God bless you. Resolve to resist.